Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today, the FY 2023 Support for Artists webinar. Before we officially begin, please note that closed captions haven't been enabled for this meeting, and you can find the instructions for how to turn them on in the chat feature. We are thrilled to be hosting so many attendees from all 10 New York State regions. My name is Megan White, and I'm the Deputy Director of Programs at the New York State Council on the Arts. We are grateful for the incredible support of Governor Hochul and the New York State Legislature for their historic investment of $140 million. On behalf of the NYSCA team, we also want to thank you for all your work in reaching your legislatures and local media regarding last year's funding. It did play a significant role in getting NYSCA to an unprecedented level of funding. This was a team effort. Today's webinar will be an overview of our FY 2023 Support for Artists grants. We will cover topics such as eligibility, key dates, and the application process. If you have not done so already, make sure you check out our FY 2023 webinar page for more information and registration links for this week's upcoming webinars. Many thanks to those of you who submitted questions in advance. We will have a dedicated Q&A session following the presentation, and you can submit questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom. We encourage you to listen to the entire presentation before submitting your questions today. We have also budgeted time to go over should we receive a lot of questions as your schedule allows. A reminder that this webinar will be recorded and posted on the NYSCA website. We will share that link with you when it is live. I'm now pleased to introduce NYSCA Program Director Arian Blanco and Program Officer Oren Chait, who will take us through the opportunity. Welcome, Arian and Oren.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for that great introduction. My name is Arian Blanco, Program Director here at New York State Council on the Arts. And today I will be presenting our Support for Artists Information webinar with my colleague, Program Officer Oren Chait. Once again, just please hold off your questions till the end, as I believe that we're going to answer many of your questions as part of the presentation. So let's get to it. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some links, some important links. My apologies. Okay, here we are. Yes, we're immensely grateful to Governor Hochul, of course. It's a historic $140 million investment that has been made for arts and cultural funding. Again, this is the grant-making funds to be distributed out through all 62 counties. So we're really excited as the point agency to distribute these funds far and wide. There are 5 NYSCA opportunities that are currently open, and there will be one later this fall for capital projects. Next slide, please. Funding overview. The New York State Council on the Arts, or NYSCA, as we like to call it here, is committed to providing opportunities for artists at all stages in their careers to continue to develop and present their work. NYSCA Support for Artists seeks to enhance the vibrant and diverse artistic voices of New York State-based art makers, like yourselves here in the room today, invest in projects that represent significant growth in the artistic development of the individual artists, as well as strengthen the relationship between individual artists and the artistic goals and mission of the sponsoring or commissioning organization as applicable. We say as applicable because there are really 2 kinds of applications. One's where the sponsored artist has a working relationship with the organization or the company, say a theater company sponsoring, for example, a playwright to write a play that they'll then produce. But we also have what we call self-directed artist request, where the artist may not be tied to an organization, and there may be self-producing the work that they're proposing to get these creative funds for. And both kinds of applications are certainly acceptable here in Support for Artists. Next slide, please. Prequalification. I'm going to get through this slide and then be really clear about who's responsible for prequalification. So in general, any organization serving as a fiscal sponsor must be pre-qualified in the New York State Grants Gateway System online portal by the application deadline to be eligible for funding. Nonprofit organizations applying to NYSCA, even if only serving as a fiscal sponsor, must pre-qualify to do business with the state of New York. And that's true of doing business with any state New York agency. All sponsoring organizations must be pre-qualified again at the New York State Grants Gateway online portal at the application deadline to be eligible for funding. Please note that this is a separate portal from the application portal. Don't wait, especially if you've never applied for NYSCA before. Start the process now. Next slide, please. We have new applicants. Begin that pre-qualification process as soon as possible. An initial pre-qualification does take a little bit of time and back and forth with a lot of information that needs to be submitted. So you definitely want to give yourself as much time before the application deadline to be pre-qualified. Returning applicants. If you're a returning applicant, you've already been pre-qualified because if you applied in the past, you've definitely been pre-qualified. Renewing your pre-qualification status, making sure you're back in pre-qualification status. This takes less time. Usually it's uploading expired annual documents like 990 filings and charities registrations, for example. But make sure that you know your status and that you're able to address anything that might be missing so you're pre-qualified in time for our application deadline. Individual artists, that's most of you in this room, you do not need to pre-qualify in Grants Gateway. This is not something you handle or deal with. You work with your fiscal sponsor who is sponsoring you, that's their responsibility. Of course, if you have any additional questions on pre-qualification requirements, please contact our help desk. There's the email there for that, or you can always visit our website for more information as well. Next slide, please. Key dates, very important dates. Guidelines have been posted since May 9th, 2022, just a few days back. And the application portal, i.e. to the portal in which applications can be submitted into, will be open May 24th and will be open through July 12th, 2022 at 4 p.m. That's the deadline, just keep that in mind. So that's essentially 8 weeks where the application portal is open, and over 9 weeks as of today, where you can start getting the materials ready in preparation for getting the stuff in. Again, as an artist, you'll be working with your fiscal sponsor who will ultimately, with their credentials, submit the application on your behalf. Just keep in mind, artists, oftentimes the sponsoring organization will have a deadline that's sooner than these deadlines because they need the time to submit the actual application package into our portals by the deadline. Next slide, please. And now I'll be turning it over to my colleague, Oren Chase. Oren, take it away.
So here we have the NYSCA Support for Artists overview. In fiscal year 2023, artists may apply for a creative grant to NYSCA from the following artistic areas: choreography commissions, composer compositions, film media and new technology, folk and traditional arts, interdisciplinary, literature, theater commissions, visual arts. Next slide. So here's
before we get to the next slide. I just wanted to say that if we go back, in every case, the Support for Artists grants are structured as creative grants to be paid to the lead artist named in the application for devising, developing, or otherwise completing the creation of the proposed work. These are not production grants. Contractually, this creative work is to occur between January and December of 2023. Again, applications made this year are for funding creative activity happening next year. And very important to select the correct artistic area listed here that best aligns with the proposed work, because this is how we determine which peer panels review it, and also which support materials you're required to submit. And we'll go to the next slide from here. Thank you.
Further overview, the awards will be $10,000. While no matching amount is required, if the applicant proposes work that will require more resources than this grant can offer, the applicant should explain how they will be able to complete the work. The applicant artist must be 18 years of age or older and a New York State resident as of the application deadline. NYSCA funds 1 year out. This means that applications made this year are for creative activities occurring next year. For questions, please contact the program staff, and you can view our contact information here at this website. Next slide. Some of the sponsoring organization responsibilities. As NYSCA cannot make grants directly to individuals, each applicant must be sponsored by an eligible New York State nonprofit organization. Grants are awarded to the sponsoring organization, which then directs the funds to the artist. Eligible fiscal sponsors are nonprofit organizations incorporated or registered to do business in New York State. Such organizations must be fully pre-qualified in the grants gateway. The sponsoring organizations may serve as fiscal agents and limit their role to receiving, dispersing, and reporting on grants. The sponsoring organization may alternatively provide additional fiscal, administrative, and production services to the artists they sponsor. Sponsoring organizations other than service organizations may request support for only one creative grant in each area of support per year.
Just really important to keep in mind that sponsoring organizations may not impose a fee on the artist for sponsoring their application. However, an administrative fee of up to $500 of the grant award may be charged. Okay, so that's certainly applicable. Other responsibilities that the sponsor organization might have will include things like submitting, should you get a grant, of course, submitting a final report on the grant, and as well as filing, for example, a 1099 form for the artists that received the funding as required, as these creative grants are considered earned income. Next slide, please.
The sponsored artist responsibilities. Recognizing that when choosing a sponsor, it is best practice that the artist understands the role of the sponsoring organization. Working with the sponsoring organization regarding the submission of the application, supplying the sponsoring organization with a completed application narrative and any relevant support materials, including the proof of residency, keeping themselves apprised of all NYSCA deadlines, providing proper NYSCA credit upon receiving a grant, offering public assets during the grant period. This might be a performance of the work or the work in progress, a presentation, an online component, or other publicly accessible element. Note, artistic control of and proprietary rights to any supported project rests exclusively with the artist. Next slide, please. Some of the registration questions. These are filled out by the sponsoring organization in the online application portal. These questions pertain to information about the sponsoring organization. You can see pages 7 and 8 of the Support for Artists guidelines for full list of the questions.
Yes, examples of information requests are things like the type of the organization you are, website URL of the organization, hours of operation, facility details, public service, et cetera, stuff like that. And again, as it relates to the sponsoring organization. Next slide, please.
The sponsor request questions. Again, these are filled out by the sponsoring organization in the online application portal. These questions pertain to information about the sponsored artist and the project. The sponsoring organization is going to verify the lead artist named in the application is a current New York State resident. They're going to verify that sponsored artist is not a staff or board member of the sponsoring organization. They're verifying that the lead artist named in the application did not apply last year for the NYSCA Support for Artists opportunity. The basic contact information for the sponsored artist, which is their legal name, address, their email, and their phone. The project title, you would provide a name of the proposed project. This could be up to 100 characters. The project description, providing a brief description of the proposed project. This could also be up to 250 characters. The funded projects will be awarded $10,000. A sponsoring organization is eligible to take an administrative fee up to $500 for a funded project. They would list the amount of the fee being charged. If they're not charging a fee and they're waiving it, they could put 0. You would select the artistic area from the drop-down box, and you can see page 8 of the Support for Artists guidelines for a full list of questions.
Yeah, for the project description, think this as your press-ready description that we could put out to the public about your project. Next slide, please.
Some of the narrative application questions. So on a self-produced document, each applicant is to speak to the following points as it relates to their proposed project, up to 10,000 character limit. You would include the project title. You're going to describe the project for which you're seeking support, including the work to be done in 2023. Provide a statement written by the lead artist describing their distinctive vision, stylistic and thematic qualities to be expressed in the proposed work. Include specific context about how the proposed project builds on similar work in your field. You list out and describe each work sample's relationship to the proposal. So describe each work sample and the relationship between the work sample and the proposed project, noting any stylistic or technical elements that are directly related to the proposed project. If the proposed project represents a new direction or a departure from your past work, as demonstrated in the work sample, this should also be discussed. Highlight how the individual or team possesses relevant experience to creatively lead this project. Define the project's intended audience and detail any aspect of the project which will be made accessible to the audience in 2023 as applicable. You can articulate any novel approaches to public engagement with regards to the creative process or public presentation of the proposed project.
Yeah, just some takeaways on this information here. Just keep in mind that this is to be filled out by all applicants. It's the same set of narrative questions for all, regardless of discipline that's selected. And it's to be provided, it's done offline in its own document, and it's provided as the first part of your uploaded support materials package. Again, yeah, see page 9 of Support for Artist Guidelines for full instructions on this. And remember, it's characters. It's 10,000 characters, not words. So that's about 1650 character per question in terms of these bullets. Again, that includes letters, numbers, spaces, special characters as well. So keep that in mind in terms of developing your narrative response. Next slide, please.
The application support materials. Every artistic area has a specific set of support material requirements. Support materials, including your narrative question responses, are to be provided as a single multi-page PDF that your fiscal sponsor will upload into the online platform. Please review the specific support materials that pertain to your specific request. These are listed under each artistic area's summary on page 10 to 15 of the Support for Artists Guidelines. Some support materials are required, while others are optional. Please be sure to provide all the required support materials at minimum. When providing video materials, please note that you are to create a links page listing the links that the panel and staff will use to access this type of support material. Actual video files are not uploaded into the application portal. Please be sure to provide these links without a passport and ensure that they remain active and available for review through the end of this year. Eric, you're on mute.
Quick on the draw there. Some common support materials examples include, of course, the narrative application response page, right? Oftentimes we're going to ask resumes that will be required. Again, these are probably of all applicants. For the links page to the video work samples, be sure to test the link to ensure that they work. Okay, that's really important. Again, not password protected. It can be a private link as long as we can access it. And then you do want to sort of, you can use that opportunity to provide the link and of course some details about the project in it so we know what we're looking at as we're going to that links page as part of your application package. Other support materials may include excerpts of a script or literary work, diagrams, stills, for example. It will all depend on the artist discipline you're applying under. So you do want to review those sections to know what's required and what's optional and what you want to submit for your particular package, depending on the discipline you've chosen. In general, you want to be what we call the CCC. You want your full package in terms of the narrative and all the support materials to be clear, concise, yet complete. Next slide, please.
How is my application evaluated? NYSCA artist support grants will be assessed under one all-encompassing criterion, creativity. Panelists will consider the application questions and support materials to determine a single rating on a scale of 5 to 0 for the application. Any application scoring 2 and below will not be eligible for support. So here you can see in the creativity, some of the things that the panelists will be looking for in your application, that you have a clear artistic vision, relevance to the artistic development of the artist, significance, distinctiveness, and innovative qualities of the project, the creative contributions to the discipline, the viability of the project's prospects for completion, the relationship and suitability of the project to the artistic goals and mission of the sponsoring or commissioning organization, if that's applicable, and proposals that include novel approaches to public engagement with regards to the creative process or public presentation are definitely encouraged.
Please keep in mind that this list should inform how you answer your narrative portion of the application. So it goes hand in hand. Sort of what you say you should use this as sort of your reference point in terms of how you articulate your responses in your narrative portion of the application. Next slide, please.
And here you'll see our scoring guide, which panel will look to when they're scoring each application. The score of 5 would meet or exceed all benchmarks. 4 meets most benchmarks. 3 meets some benchmarks. A 2 meets few benchmarks. A 1 does not meet any benchmarks. And a 0 has questions left unanswered. Activities are not arts or cultural, and responses provided are insufficient to detail the understanding of the programming. And next slide. So how is the application evaluated? NYSCA has advisory panels which play a key role in NYSCA's grant evaluation process. NYSCA selects a diverse group of professionals from across the state to fulfill the advisory panel's role. Each panelist evaluates and numerically rates each request against the criteria in the funding opportunities guidelines. These ratings are then aggregated to one average score for each request. These ratings inform the funding recommendations made by NYSCA staff. The panels meet with program staff and present and have an opportunity to discuss applications. We are now accepting nominations for panelists. You can see the link here to self-nominate if you're interested in serving as a panelist.
Okay, thank you, Oren. Thank you for that recap of our process and the various elements of our application for support for artists. Now we're going to move to some sort of frequently asked questions. And again, this is just a warm up to the live Q&A that we want to definitely allow enough time for in the next few minutes before we wrap up. So these are like practice questions. For this segment, I'm going to ask the question. Oren's going to answer it. He's going to get the right answer because it's right in front of us. But just to give you a sense of what our responses are to these most common questions. So Oren, you ready?
Yes.
Good. How do I register as an artist in order to apply? I can't get in there, man. What's going on?
You do not register as an artist. All individual artists must apply using a qualified New York State-based nonprofit organization as their fiscal sponsor. The artists are not going to interact with our grant-making platforms. The fiscal sponsor would, and they submit the application on the artist's behalf.
Good points, Oren. Good points. Just keep in mind, this includes for Grant Gateway Prequalification, as we discussed, the application portal registration steps, and of course, the submission of the application itself. I know some of you in the audience may have your own companies, like an LLC or an S corporation as an artist. For example, just note that these are not legal entities that are eligible to serve as a fiscal sponsor, nor are nonprofits who are outside of New York State unless they're registered to do business in New York State. So you might have some kind of sponsoring entity, let's say in LA or California or something like that. Just know that unless they're registered here, they wouldn't be qualified either. Next question. Hopefully Oren's ready for this. As an artist, how can I find a fiscal sponsor, man?
So NYSCA does not pair artists with fiscal sponsors. However, anyone can look through our past NYSCA funded list to see organizations that have successfully served as fiscal sponsors in the previous years. This is available on our website at the link shown here.
Fantastic. And just a little tip there. When you do there, you want to use individual artists as a filter for program, and that gets to a lot of the organizations that have sponsored our request. And this list will be folks that were successful. So these are grants. And then when you see the list, you will see just organizations. And I know we've gotten questions about getting more information on that. You can click on those listed organizations, and then on the next screen, you'll see sort of the drill down of the details of the grant, artist name, description, stuff like that. There isn't an easy list of that, but you can individually look at what was funded within that initial list. Okay, next question. This is from the perspective of an organization. I have a multi-year grant with NYSCA for support for organization, or I may be planning to apply this year for support for organization. Can I still serve as a fiscal sponsor? I mean, will this hurt my chances? Can I still help an artist? Oren, what do you think?
Yes, you can definitely apply. Serving as a fiscal sponsor in no way precludes the sponsored organization from applying to other NYSCA opportunities they qualify for. So go ahead and apply.
Yes, in fact, we consider this a generally speaking, a service to the field. So we're always grateful for organizations serving as fiscal sponsors to all the artists out there. Okay, next slide. All right, next question. A few more warm-ups and we'll wrap things up here. Oren, I'm on the board or maybe even on the staff of a nonprofit organization. Can this organization serve as my fiscal sponsor?
No, they cannot. So given that sponsoring organizations act as the custodian of the grant, it can constitute a conflict of interest should the grantee be currently on the board or an artistic administrative staff member.
Okay, key point here is sort of decision makers. I know in some cases, the organizations, for example, orchestras, that they pay musicians on payroll in a way. Certainly if you're hired as let's say a designer of the theater company, and it's 1099, you're not on staff per se, as a full-time staff member, that's okay. Dancers as well, sometimes they get paid on payroll, and that can be okay. But again, if you're a decision maker running the organization, helps run the organization, that would constitute a conflict of interest. And if you want to get your own personal artistic work done or sponsored in this way, we advise that you work with a different organization that you're not tied to that way. Okay, next question. I applied last year under support for artist opportunity. Can I apply this year?
No, you cannot. As the sit-out rule still applies to both the lead artist and the project, whether funding was received or not.
And again, we do appreciate all the hard work everyone puts into these applications every year, but we definitely get way more requests than we can ever fund. And this is a way of ensuring that we get funding out to as many artists as possible year over year. And also that you think about, how competitive is your particular project as conceived at this point in time. So sometimes it might be better to just wait 1 year to apply the following year instead of applying, not getting funding, and then having to wait another year to apply. But that's the rationale for that. Also, we have here, again, this is not an exhaustive list, but a list of service type organizations that provide support to both organizations, but certainly individual artists in the variety of art forms that we're funding these days. The one thing that these have in common is all these organizations do work through partnership grants with NYSCA to provide all kinds of services, in some cases re-grant opportunities. The first two apply to multi-artists in a variety of different disciplines are supported. New York Media Arts Map and Waveform, for example, is mostly video, media, film, video, as well as visual artists. Art New York is a theater service organization. New York State Literary Types, Folk Arts, and Architectural League for Design Artists. And they're actually hosting our design commissions as a re-grant opportunity these days, starting this year moving forward, last year moving forward. Next slide, please. Okay, just wrapping up here, who should I contact with questions? For technical questions, submitting online applications or pre-qualification, our help desk. For opportunity-related questions, please contact program staff. View contact information here. That link provides our staff list. Warren and I are certainly there. Other colleagues that represent all the various disciplines are also there. So whoever, if you have a relationship, whoever you think, that's one way to do it. But otherwise, any of our staff members can answer general application questions. Please submit questions at least 2 weeks before the application deadline. Note that we're unable to review full written drafts or provide feedback that way on the application materials. But we will soundboard with you, like say you're thinking of 2 different competing projects, which one might be better, or hey, listen, my project has elements of different disciplines, or it's happening in a certain sort of specific way. Is this a good fit for me? We can certainly help sort of think through those kinds of situations, case by case. And again, yeah, the earlier you get to us, the better. Anything certainly within a week, we can't guarantee we'll get back to you, but we're available, email, phone, as well as through these presentations. Next slide, please. And coming up, webinar week continues since the 16th through the 19th. Please note that all our webinars are recorded and posted on our NYSCA website, including this one. So you can certainly queue this up and review it again, or share with your friends if you're working as a team to get an application together. Office hours. These are office hours that are going to be online office hours that we're going to be holding. So check our website for that. It's going to be the format's a little more interactive, so we can get more sort of personalized about questions you might have and responses that way. And of course, beyond those, you can reach NYSCA staff, as I said before. And again, for those organizations, don't wait to pre-qualify or confirm your pre-qualification. All right, fantastic. All right, and now, next slide, please. Thank you for joining us, and we'll move on to the live Q&A session. And for this session, my colleague, Oren Chait, will be basically sifting through, along with the rest of the team behind the scenes, all the possible questions you might have been coming up with. And he's going to be asking me, and I'm going to do my best to give the best answer possible to get you going in the right direction. Oren, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so we have a question here. Once we've applied, how do we find out about the grant notification? Like when does the artist get paid? How does that work?
Always a good, when do I get paid? I love that. I love that. Direct and to the point. So the evaluation process happens through the course of this year through a variety of panels. So it can happen earlier, but don't expect notification to occur earlier than December for the most part of this year. And again, this is for the following year. Very important, as a sponsored request, we notify the sponsoring organization, who then in turn is responsible to let you know the outcome of the request. And of course, once you know the outcome, folks are welcome to call us to get panel feedback about your application, especially if you're planning to apply in the future, or even to other funders, in terms of getting that feedback in terms of what work did it.
Great.
So next question.
So we have a question here. One of the board members is a working artist who donates the sales of their art to the nonprofit. Can we sponsor that artist in this opportunity?
Again, like we discussed earlier in the guidelines, if you're a board member or a administrative artistic leadership type staff, decision maker, that would be a conflict of interest. So I would encourage that artist to work with another organization that they're not part of that way as a board member or staff member to serve as a fiscal sponsor.
So we have a question. We are a presenting organization. Can we apply for artist grants on behalf of artists?
Fine point here. So yes, any qualified nonprofit can serve as a fiscal sponsor. Now, for support for artist opportunity, keep in mind that if you're a presenting or producing organization, you can make one request per discipline area. So we have 8 disciplines, that's 8 requests in each of the discipline areas. If you're a service organization that does this as a service, it's usually not tied to the artist in any way, or actively producing work, you can submit as many, as a service, of course, you can submit as many requests to any number of disciplines as your bandwidth allows for.
Okay, we have a question on how can we find out who to contact specifically? So we do have funding area pages on our website, which have the contact info on which staff members to contact. If you are for some reason lost, you can always contact the help desk and they can reroute you. We have another question. Are we not allowed to apply 2 years in a row?
Oren, what's the answer on that one?
We had covered this earlier. The answer is no. Even if you do get a grant or you do not get a grant, this just allows us to reach more artists. So you have to gauge whether you're ready to apply this year or you want to wait 1 year. So you definitely cannot apply 2 years in a row.
Okay, and that I just want to put another fine point on this. That's irrespective of which discipline. Like, if you applied 1 year as a theater artist, it doesn't matter. Maybe you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do a media project. If you applied 1 year, it's one opportunity for artist support these days. You're going to have to sit out, regardless of the type of project as well.
Okay, we have another question. Can you please articulate further what is meant by novel approaches to public engagement? Arian?
Sure. Again, these opportunities encompass a wide variety of art making activity, obviously throughout the various disciplines and even within the discipline. So anything that you're able to do where you're working with a local community or a segment of a population, that you're ingratiating yourself with those folks as part of making the art or devising the work, and or in some cases it could be the work itself where it has a very specific audience. It's meant to be seen, and it has some kind of sort of either social justice element. That's what's meant by that. Again, it will apply differently to different projects, but it's something we're looking to see to the extent that that's there for you to, toot your own horn about that and speak about that.
Great. So here's a question. Can a creative team, for example, the music composer and a lyricist and a librettist, get submitted as one application, or does just one lead artist have to be listed? How does that work, Aaron?
Sure, very good question. So certainly in many of, and especially in the media projects, they're usually collaborations, and this is a good sort of musical version of that, a collaboration. Among the key collaborators, you would name one of the three as the lead artist of record for the application. But certainly you want to speak to the collaboration and the nature of the collaboration. And in that case, you would definitely submit the resumes of those other key creative team members. So it would be one application of which amongst yourselves, one of you would be named the lead artist on record. Again, these are paid as creative grants. Contractually, they are to go from the sponsor organization to lead artist. Once the lead artist gets those funds, they can actually deploy them however they want at that point. So if it's about sort of paying each other, that's something that, again, that would be between the lead artist and the rest of the collaborating team, but that's certainly possible at that point.
Great. So there was a mention that this is a creative grant, not a production grant specifically. Could you explain that a little bit further for us? Sure,
yeah. I think I just touched on it right now, but let me further do my best to clarify. So yeah, the spirit of these support for artist grants these are creative grants. It's about development, and or completion of the work. So to conceive the score, for a media artist to maybe the completion aspect is getting it through post-production. It's not about distribution or otherwise performance or performance fees to produce the work or have it up and going in that way. That being said, especially in situations where it's a self-directed proposal by an artist who's independently maybe producing the work, once you receive that creative grant as the artist, you can deploy those funds however you see fit. Again, but it's not something that we're going to look at the sponsor organization to report on that way. They're responsible to pay it as a creative fee to the artist recipient named in the contract.
Okay, another question here. Is there a limit to the number of applications a sponsoring institution can support?
Okay, once again, if you're a service organization, there is no limit. We did have like a 20 request limit years back that has been lifted for a number of years now. So there is no limit. If you're not a service organization, but rather a producing or a presenting organization that wants to, serve in this role, again, the limit is 1 per discipline in that case. And again, these are the sponsor organization can apply every year. There is no sit-out rule for them. It's the named artist that must sit out a year.
So another question, can I submit for multiple projects?
Yeah, I would need a little more detail than that. Sure, if it's a different artist and a different project, for sure. I mean, otherwise I would need more details on that particular question. If you're the lead artist, you're only submitting once, though. So if you're the lead artist and you have multiple projects, you need to select which project you're going to be the lead artist for our grant opportunity this year. It would be 1 in that case. So maybe I think that's where it was coming from.
Yeah. So just for some clarification, I think this is more of a statement. So a sponsoring organization can apply to support for artists in more than one discipline. One in the theater commission and a different artist for a new media commission.
Right, correct.
And just to make sure the fiscal sponsor, the organization can apply for the support for artists each year, it's the artist that can apply 2 years in a row. Is that correct?
That's correct. Bing, bing.
So here's another question. I'm not sure if my activity will qualify for a grant. Who should I contact?
Okay, depending on the discipline, you can definitely, again, any staff member should be able to work with you. But if it's a theater project, contact our folks from the theater program. If it's a media project, actually, I have lead on the media project in interdisciplinary. Oren has lead on the theater projects. If it's a music project, our colleagues in the music program, our colleagues in folk, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I am happy to at least shepherd any initial questions you might have. And, if it needs to go to somewhere else, I'll route it that way. But again, any staff member, though, can definitely work with you to answer your specific questions.
Okay. So there's a question from someone who received a NYSCA Composer Commission in 2021. Can I apply now?
Yes, if you received it for fiscal year 2021, which means you applied in 2020, right? And then you got to do the creative work in 2021. At this point, you can apply now because it's for 2023. So you skipped a year. You didn't apply last year.
Okay, a specific question here. Can you apply for a project you've been working on that's appeared at one venue, but you hope to move it to another and expand?
That's a great question, actually, as it relates to the sentiment of what constitutes new work. These are creative grants for devising new work, right? As we've already said and established. But it's okay if the work is still in process and if there's been maybe some workshops of it and development, but not like full productions. That can be okay. Again, extrapolate this for the various discipline areas as appropriate. So it's fine that there is existing work that maybe can serve as the springboard for the new work that you're proposing. But if it's materially complete and it's just more continued workshop and fine tuning in live work, that's probably not as competitive. So by all means, I would actually anyone that has that question that has source material and in terms of your starting point for the grant opportunity, call us so we can discuss and suss out the specific details. But it can be okay as long as it's not fully fleshed out at the time of application. Again, we got to see what the sort of creative work is still happening in the funding year.
There's a question: if an artist received the statewide community regrant, which is through NYSCA this year, would that artist be eligible to apply for the Support for Artists grant?
Right. So if you already have it this year, you can apply this year because the funds for NYSCA is next year. So in that particular scenario, that would be okay. What you cannot do is apply in the same funding year for the two opportunities.
Some other questions we get are if they've gotten a knife of fellowship, can they still apply? Can they apply to both that and a New York City DCLA grant?
Yeah, all those are different grant opportunities that they fund things in a different way, or they're not related to NYSCA in case of DCA. So there is no conflict there in those, especially in those two examples you gave.
Okay, how do I nominate a panelist? So there's a form on our website. If you go to it, it's earlier in the presentation, but if you go to our website, you can see, and you can just fill out that form. You could nominate someone, or they could self-nominate themselves.
Yeah, if you nominate, just let them know that you're nominating them, if you're nominating someone else. But otherwise, yes, we're definitely looking, again, from across the state, not just New York City, but across the state, we like to have a cross-section of peer professionals that are the ones that do this great work behind the scenes. And I will say, and Oren, I know will agree with me, it's a lot of work, but it's every panelist that has served has just been really grateful in terms of the kind of learning opportunity that they've received from being a panelist and providing that service. I do consider it a kind of civic duty service situation.
Yep. Okay, question here, is it necessary for the work that is created from the grant to have a plan or intention to be presented in the state of New York?
Yes, and 2 points on that I want to tease out. You know, we do have a public performance component as part of receiving the grant, associated with receiving the grant. But again, we're not funding necessarily the production of it. So we're funding the creative sort of development of it. And whenever possible, if it occurs within the grant period, that's what we're looking for. Again, it doesn't have to be the final version of it. It could be a work in progress. It could be a talk back around what you're working on. And in those cases, that one presentation does have to be in New York State for the benefit of New York State audiences. But once that threshold is met, it can be produced anywhere else, including a finished version of it down the line, for example. Also, some projects may not have anything happening publicly during the contract period. That can be okay, as long as you have a sense of where future potential productions are going to happen, or presentations, or screenings, depends on the kind of project, or viewings, right? And you would work with your fiscal sponsor to note those specific opportunities, presentations, as part of your final report. And then we can review it and usually approve it if there's a plan in place to present the work outside the contract period. Great questions, guys.
Okay, we have a question. Where can I find information on the, I assume this is New York State residency criteria. So that's in the guidelines. It's on page 6 specifically. So you could work with your sponsor on that information. Again, I think you just covered this, but just to recap it again, what is the public access requirement?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this got caught up in the queue. I feel like that's the whole idea, that we do have some kind of public component associated with it. It can occur as part of the grant period. That's what we do state in the guidelines. But obviously, given the various timelines with developing new work, if it's occurring outside the timeline, as long as there's a game plan to produce it or present it or offer that public component in the coming year or so, we can usually work with that and get the final report approved.
Okay, can you please review how an artist can find a fiscal sponsoring organization, or is this info on the website?
Or I'm going to kick that one back to you.
Yeah, it is on our website. You would go under the past grant search function, and you would search under what's called individual artists, and you can see everyone who was funded through a fiscal sponsor in the past year, specifically last year or the year prior, and the organization will come up. and you would just seek out that organization and see if they are sponsoring artists this next year. Some have different deadlines and requirements, but just take a look at our website to find a sponsoring organization.
Yeah, so I will also say that in my conversations with individual artists who are in the same kind of situation, oftentimes looking for a fiscal sponsor, when we have a discussion about different companies they've worked with, it turns out they've actually worked with companies that apply to NYSCA specifically, if not arts and cultural related. So really think about what companies maybe have presented your work in the past, you've maybe collaborated with over the years. Local galleries, local multi-art centers in the area, maybe where you've taken classes. You'll be surprised, NYSCA funds broadly many organizations, arts and cultural institutions across the state. You might already actually have a kind of relationship. So certainly that's worth being your first stop to try to connect with an organization that can serve this role as fiscal sponsor.
Okay, question here. Can I apply for a dance commission and a theater commission?
I'm meaning the artist? No. The individual artist must pick one discipline. You get one request every other year. Now, over time, you can certainly change that up if you're so inclined, but it's only once as the artist.
Okay.
Only one application per year as the artist.
So next question, can an organization apply for both support for artists and support for organization grants? Yes, the answer to that is yes. It's an exempt request, so go ahead and apply to both if you're eligible and meet the criteria. The question here, what is the contract period? Like when does the work have to begin and finish specifically?
Great question. Yeah, so again, the application is being made as part of this grant cycle to support activity that contractually would occur between January and December of 2023, next year. And that's why we use the FY2023 sort of precursor, when we're describing our opportunities. It's FY2023 because it's really, you're applying this year for funding that's going to occur and cover activity happening next year.
So can a sponsoring organization who has a resident choreographer apply for support? Or would they be eligible as an artist to apply?
Support for, if it's a resident choreographer that's not part of the staff, it's like on assignment, I think that would constitute, based on that description, someone that's not on staff per se, that could be sponsored by that entity for a creative grant. I'm not sure about the other part.
Okay, and they can always apply through a service organization if they are on staff.
Correct.
Of the organization, and there's conflict there. So,
and again, it's part of it's part of keeping that custodial nature of the grant, sort of above board. That's what this rigmarole is all about. Sorry, Oren, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just reading this as a longer one. So here we go. I'm co-director of an organization and plan to apply for support for organizations. And I'm also an artist planning to apply for support for artists. So I have two separate fiscal sponsors, one for the organization and one for my artistic work. Can I apply for both and have, or do I have to pick one?
That's a really good question. It's funding different kind of work. Okay, so the organizational work that you're applying maybe as a collective would be that support for organization would have to be for, and again, there's a separate seminar on this, of course, webinar on this, ongoing production, programming activity, right? Yourself as an individual being sponsored under this opportunity, support for artists would be a creative grant to devise work. So that can work as long as one is not paying the other, I would say, in this particular example.
Great. Okay, another question. I'm on the administrative staff of an organization applying for organizational support. is it a conflict of interest if I apply for an artist grant for my personal project? And then there's a second.
Not
part
if you're
to that.
using,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Not
Oh.
if you're using a different organization as your fiscal sponsor.
Yeah. What if the same organization serves as my fiscal sponsor?
That would be an issue. We would flag that. And the organization has to attest to the fact that that's not the case as part of applying.
Okay, and I think this is our last question. We're coming up on time here. How do I become a fiscal sponsor? All right, how would an organization become a fiscal sponsor if they've never done that?
Well, obviously, like any organization, for any of our opportunities, you want to get pre-qualified in Grants Gateway. Once that's established, you can go into the portal. I mean, you can do it concurrently too, by the way. But you can then submit applications because you've been pre-qualified. But you don't want to submit applications without being pre-qualified, because then all of them will be deemed ineligible. Okay, so that's basically, while you can do them concurrently, you want to be sure that you're pre-qualified through Grants Gateway as a company, so that all your registered applications that you submitted are considered eligible by the deadline, by the application deadline. All right, it looks like we've wrapped that up, and I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Director Megan White.
Thanks so much, Arian and Oren. That concludes today's webinar. A reminder that this webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the NYSCA website, along with the presentation deck this week. We will send an email around with a link when they are live. A reminder that tomorrow's webinar is the Support for Organizations at 11 a.m., and there's still time to register. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's wonderful to share this virtual space with you all. We look forward to receiving your applications by July 12th. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye now.